The next chapter in the Great Cabana House saga is insulation. Now that I have everything cleared out, I need to start putting it up to keep things warm. Based on my research, the area we live in requires R15 batt insulation. So I went to the local home store and purchased a whole bunch of it, and shockingly learned how expensive it is. I also treated myself to an electric staple gun, that way things will speed up a little bit. I got everything open after watching a few YouTube videos on how to do it, seeing as how I've never done this before in my life. Next up was to try out the electronic staple gun. My father-in-law suggested one that you swing like a hammer, but I wanted to try the electric one to speed things up. His concern is the electric ones tends to wear out a little bit faster, but if this thing lasts for the project, which is only a few days, I think I'll be happy. Another advantage of the electric staple gun is I can use it one-handed, so I can hold the bat up with the other hand, or in this case, I can record myself stapling, which is great for YouTube. The stapler worked pretty well, and I was able to get up my very first piece of insulation. As it seems to hold okay, I decided to go ahead and start putting the rest of it up. As I'm going along, I'm having to get the insulation behind a workbench. In hindsight, I wish I had just removed the workbench to begin with. My original thought was to keep it in place, but later on in the project, I ended up having to take it down. And in the end, I think it looks better without this rustic workbench in the finished product. Honestly, the slowest part of doing insulation is dealing with small pieces, having to cut them to size and make sure they fit properly. Measuring and cutting takes forever. If you run one long piece of insulation and staple it, it's not really a big deal. At this point in the project, I haven't installed any air conditioning, and this is in the middle of the summer, so I'm sweating like crazy in this garage. I'm dripping all over the insulation, but I don't think it's going to bother it. Cutting insulation is a bit annoying because you have to measure it, mark it, and then go over the area several times with a box cutter to get to all the layers of the fiberglass. Once you get every little piece of insulation cut properly, you have to climb back up, place it, and staple it in. I'm starting to make some progress, but I still have a lot to do, and it's really hot in this garage, and I don't think insulating is making it any better. I'm now coming up to the part of the garage where the cabinets are installed, and I'm trying to decide how to insulate behind them. I don't want to have any cold spots, but I'm not really sure how to do it. You can see behind the cabinets there's a lot of mud dauber nests and dirt. The way I got that out was to beat it with a stick. One way you can get insulation into hard-to-reach places is to use a blow-in machine, but this requires special insulation and renting the machine. In the end, what I decided to do is just run insulation underneath the cabinets. I then took all the pieces of scrap that I cut away, and I jammed it behind each cabinet with a stick. It actually worked pretty well, and it was a lot cheaper than buying the blow-in. Unfortunately, I didn't record any of this because it was kind of labor-intensive and required two hands. Because the quote cabana house is actually a garage, I have to deal with the garage door when insulating. I don't want to cover the door up or remove it because I want to maintain that functionality. After some research, I found insulation specifically made for garage doors. The system uses these little plastic spindles that you stick up with 3M tape, but before you can do it, you have to make sure the surface is really clean, so I blew all the dirt away and then hit it with some Windex. The garage insulation is pretty clever because it comes with these individually cut vinyl back pieces that, in theory, are the size of the squares in the back of a garage door. Unfortunately, my garage door is a bit old, so it's not standard size, so I still had to do some cutting, but it's still a little bit more aesthetic, and it holds up really nicely. Once each piece is cut to size, you have to kind of tuck it into each nook and cranny to make sure everything is covered. After I finished installing all the pieces, I felt like the finished product looked really good. Hopefully it keeps the draft out, or in the current weather, keeps the sun from cooking the garage. Because the garage door doesn't make an airtight seal all the way around, I decided to use some of the silver insulation to fill in the cracks. It's easy to cut, and I can staple it down pretty quickly too. In this view, you're looking at the top of the garage door and down, and you can see the daylight that comes through. It's about an inch that I need to make up for. To cover the gap, I cut the silver insulation into some long strips, and I'm tacking it down and kind of tucking it in. This is just the first layer, but I think it's going to work pretty well. I'm not sure what I'm going to put on top of it, but I'm going to keep working with the project. A nice thing about this garage door is on the outside there's actually an awning that both provides some shade and some cover for rain, so I don't actually have to worry about water leaking into this. Here's kind of an overview of the finished garage door. Now that I've got it insulated, I'm trying to figure out a way to cover it a little bit with a sheet or something to make it a little bit less garage door looking. While doing the insulation, I also replaced some ceiling fans in the Cabana house. I took down the old ones and put ones up that are going to match the aesthetic once everything is done. After that, I cut some of the silver insulation and used it on the attic door. Fortunately, the ceiling of the garage had already been insulated, so I didn't have to do that part. With all the insulation in place, I'm now ready to get a mini split installed. You can see here I'm already getting some drywall in place in preparation.